not in age, but in length that I've known you. But I just want to say thank you for coming in today. We're going to go over a few different items. Mike, this is really Mike's show. I'm just going to have a few slides to contribute. But just want to say thank you, and thanks for Rich and Viatechnic for supplying the food and drinks.
We'll pass back and forth. Yeah, thanks Tim, and thanks to Langen for hosting and the space. Super great that we can be here. You know, as Tim mentioned, Mike Paciero, VDC director with Viatechnic, and as Rich alluded to, you know, we're a BIM and VDC consultant services company. We have portions of our teams that do BIM coordination for general contractors and like work with general contractors directly. We have portions of our team that model for subcontractors and represent them during BIM coordination and construction. We also have an arm of what I happen to be a part of, which is our owner consulting arm, where we work with owners to figure out how they can manage their spaces better, and particularly how they can manage their spaces and work with BIM after construction, hence the title of this talk. And so I've been at Viatechnic for about 5 years now, been kind of talking about this subject, you know, and how do we get there for a little bit longer than that. And so excited to be here, excited to go through the ideas here that are shared, and just kind of the process that we followed on a couple of projects, and, you know, partner with Tim here to talk about how things get supplemented.
You're focusing mentally way too much on this thing.
Okay.
Get into your pocket and just start talking to the group and forget about it.
All right. Well, we got some back and forth to go. So yeah, thank you, Andre. Thank you. My bad. My bad.
Back and forth, 8 to 2 seconds.
Okay. All right. Well. All right. Understood. Thank you. Appreciate that. So yeah, the onus of today's talk that we've been talking about for a while, you know, owners, and I'm sure you all have experienced this to some extent, you know, are asking for delivery of and how they can leverage 3D models at the end of construction. And so the question is really like, how does the industry best deliver on this? Is the industry delivering on this? Where is the industry delivering on this, if they're delivering? And so I think we have the objectives here, want to talk about reality capture, certainly, and how that plays a role. But generally have a better sense as to which models actually get used after construction. It's like a big, I'll get into it, but it's a big digital puzzle in terms of like, you know, what exactly do you use? You use the architect's models, you use the engineer's models, you use a different model. So we're going to get into some of those and understand like some of the questions you can ask to try to help strategize when this subject does come up, and expectations for you as a project team and expectations for your owner. So there's just some lived experience from some of Viatechnic's and Langen's projects, and I want to just take you all through it. That being said, agenda 3 sections. We're going to frame the problem a little bit first to kind of set the stage. We're going to flip it to Tim to talk about reality capture and how it's playing a role, like why we scan and how that's changing and some of the latest technologies available in his experience. And then we'll get to owner 3D models and how to navigate, you know, that journey, why and what they're asking for, and factors to consider, you know, in the process. So first, let's just frame the problem. So the secret's out, right? I don't know how long this is actually, you know, still a secret now, but the secret's out. Owners know that we are doing BIM to create their projects. And I guess like that's come a long way in the last 10 years. I would say that like, you know, that is a lot more prevalent, right? Before BIM was sort of a nice to have and an added benefit, but now it's just sort of standard care. Owners are starting to ask about that. And everyone that's been in the industry has seen a life cycle image like this, maybe this exact one before, but BIM had this promised life cycle, but we've actually really hardly ever, rarely done this portion of the life cycle, which is the operation and maintenance and the renovation, and then flip a model all the way back to, you know, model maintenance and operations and models and things like that. So that's kind of like the portion we want to focus on today. And owners are starting to ask, how do I actually complete this life cycle? And so when they do ask how I complete this life cycle, their next question is, who on the project team do I ask to get help from to go from handover to operation? So the BIM doesn't just go sit on the shelf at the end of the day, as we like to say. Do they ask the architect, the contractor, the engineer, as I kind of mentioned in the intro here? Like, who do they ask? Who actually helps facilitate this, and like whose piece of the puzzle supports the whole idea? And so if they do ask, they ask the project team, what questions or what kind of conversation generally emerges? So these are things that we've experienced and typically hear. So the owner asks for BIM to be delivered at the end of construction. The project team usually is like, well, why do you want it and what do you want to use it for? Number one question. And the owner usually gives like one of three answers, kind of depending on where they're at, right? I'm not sure, but I think it's valuable. This thing seems cool, and I'm paying for it anyways, so like I should get it, right? Or they could usually say, so I can find stuff, right? I can look behind walls, they can find equipment, they can see above ceilings. I want to be able to find stuff in my building. Or if they're a little bit more sophisticated and they've like been along the digital journey a little bit farther, they'll say for a digital twin. Big buzzword thrown out there, but a lot of conversation happening around digital twin and a lot of things happening these days to make that a little bit more tangible, let's say. So then the question goes back over to, all right, well, that's great, that's what you want it for, but how are you going to do it? I would say the project team will usually say something like, okay, well, we can give you our BIMs at project closeout. Sure, no problem. Like, and then big asterisks, like if it's in our contract to do so. There's usually a conversation around that of whether the BIM is owed at the end of construction, but kind of want to gloss over that point for this conversation, and like we can circle back to that in conversation at the end. And so the project team says, okay, we can give you our BIM at project closeout. The owner goes, yeah, but how do I know it's accurate? How do I maintain and update it? And how do I make it user-friendly? Because my people that are going to use this are not BIM people. They don't navigate 3D models. They have never probably modeled in Revit, right? I need to make this like user-friendly. And so those are the three most typical questions we get from owners when we get into this conversation. And so then we have to talk through what the options are and how you actually potentially navigate to this. So yeah, those three questions leave a huge question mark in the project with the project teams and the owner in terms of how that actually goes about doing that. So I do want to just take a step back real quick and acknowledge that I don't think that these are new questions, right? Let's replace, just because we're talking about BIM and something new, doesn't mean that this hasn't been, a problem for, a long time in the project, in the industry, right? So let's just replace model with as-built for a second, right? If you replace model with as-built, they typically will ask a lot of the same questions. They want accurate as-built, whether those are developed in 2D or 3D. They're going to need to maintain them somehow, and they need to make those as-built accessible to different teams around their facility. So they still kind of have the same problem. It's just a different technology. I think us at BioTechnic think and hope and want that BIM provides a better opportunity to do this moving into the future than maybe like the previous scenarios had done. We don't want to be dealing with red lines all day long anymore. So to summarize that, and owners, at the end of the day, when we engage with an owner, we usually go in and we talk about to their stakeholder groups, and we do interviews with their stakeholders from their security team all the way to their facilities team. It could be a varied group. And this is just some data from one of our owner engagements about, what's your biggest pain point when you, need to work through a problem in your building? Well, I don't know where stuff is. My existing condition documentation is not good. And so we grouped up the responses into 5 categories here. The biggest, it always comes back to building documentation. Always comes back to building documentation. How do we do this better moving forward in the industry? And so what can we do? How do we make this box green? I think that we can. And so these next 2 sections are sort of about Tim's role in reality capture and how that's playing a key role. And then we'll flip it back to me to talk more about owner 3D models. So, I think we're happy to pause at the end of each section for questions or comments, or if you have some along the way, feel free while we switch the mic.
Well, as you mentioned, in terms of the previous thing, yes, with AutoCAD, you said the same thing. But with as-built, so accurate. If it was done by a certain firm, you generally knew they were either good or they were very bad.
Right.
Not that there was an in-between. We also found that there's just that, okay, in terms of moving forward, it's always, okay, but I can't do it for free, or so that the price point of, because we have the drawing, isn't it very easy to just, order drawing and say it's done, so it's 3 clicks. And so should that just be $5 and a bottle of beer? Not, so a lot of times the question for a lot of architects is always, how can you get the leverage the work and leverage price point so that your paid something be.
Yep, precisely. And I think a lot of it comes back to
Where you had said that, for many, many years, yes, then even before AutoCAD, you still had the same problem with as-built. What is filed with the Department of Buildings is just tech, not necessarily has to be as-built. Rarely as-built.
right, rarely as-built. So maybe it's more, we should call it record more than we call it actual as-built, because there's problems with that whole process, right? So.
And then again, who's willing to pay it? Is it the tenant that's moving in, or is it the landlord, the architect?
Definitely. Definitely costs more for sure. Question? Comment? Why now? Basically, it's like, yeah, I think. Why now? Why now? Yeah.
But that goes to building type.
Yeah.
So like if it's a hospital, absolutely. If it's a residential building, not likely. If it's an office building, very likely, but not as likely as a hospital. So when buildings are very technical and or complex, and where the engineering is very difficult, that's where this comes in play. Not so the building types where it's just someone's house.
I would also say, I think we're reaching a tipping point with technology, which it always seems like we are with something, right? But I think technology is like, owners are seeing the data connectivity possibilities more than ever today. And they're seeing the ability to connect data with a 3D visualization of their building and understand how that can help them make faster, quicker decisions, which they couldn't do before. BIM 10 years ago wasn't ready to do that. 15 years ago, BIM for facilities management was like talked about, right? And it's kind of now getting to the point that like, I think it's actually being leverageable. I don't know that I can quantify exactly why, but I think that there's that feeling of like, it's more visible and technology can do more things today.
I would just like back on to what you're saying. Andre, this is like my second time I've been to one of these, and we met like 9 years ago. I work for the city of New York. I'm on the owner side. And 9 years ago, I had questions for why facilities and owners can't leverage them and make it work and provide value. That's why I'm here, is to see how we progress and, make that, drive down that cost.
After this, this is the 2.0 version.
Okay.
I think in November we had Leonard speaking.
Okay.
You want to listen to that one too? I think we recorded that. I know one of the recordings lately went kaput, but I hope we got that one recorded. And it's also he's coming out of the healthcare world.
Okay.
But it will, they go hand in hand.
Cool. Great. Thanks for the comment. On that note, just a real quick question before Tim gets in. Any other owner representatives in the room? Anybody from the owner side? I mean, architect, engineer, scanner, and phone. Others. Okay.
Hardware provider.
All right.
Gaining hardware provider for a German startup manufacturer.
That's helpful. Thank you.
All right. So what is reality capture? I know we have varying degrees of folks in here where some people are more advanced than others, but can anyone define what reality capture is? Come on. Rachel.
Photo.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like it doesn't necessarily, a lot of times people just say reality capture and they go right to laser scanning, but it really could be measuring with a tape measure all the way to, scanning all in drones. So we're just going to take the next couple slides to just go through a couple different technologies that are out there. So when you're working with the owners and it's going towards facilities management and you have the model, like how do you verify it? You know, what's the options out there, you know, as you're going to do renovations and everything else. So just going to take next couple of slides to go through some options that are there. So the first one would be photogrammetry. There's a lot of different technology on the market that gives you options for, you know, different purposes. So it goes all the way from DSLR high HDR photos to handheld 360 cameras where you can document with programs like OpenSpace or HoloBuilder, where you can actually reference the photography to floor plans, all the way to Matterport, which gives a very good imagery, but then you have a subset of data set that you could get, which is the LiDAR data. Now, the one thing to note that separates this from other technologies is the main sensor on for photogrammetry is the camera. So not all technologies are created equal. So just when you're speaking to owners and they say, well, I had a Matterport done that has LiDAR data. Now that's LiDAR data that was derived from photographs. So again, that's probably going to be, even though that if it's one of your quicker way to capture a space, it's going to be lower in accuracy and data that you're going to deal with. Then you move into handheld and backpack scanners.
Did we bring one?
Do we have Leica here? Is Leica here? All right. So we're going to keep this inclusive and give a couple different options. But like overall, when you get into the handheld scanners, you know, now you have two sensors. You have the photogrammetry component, and then you have the LiDAR component. Now you're stepping up your game from photogrammetry alone, where you're using just photography, where you have the actual LiDAR sensors that are taking the measurements. Each unit has plus or minuses, you know, like in pros and cons. But at the end of the day, you know, you're able to capture spaces very quickly, you know, very accurately, because you do have that LiDAR sensor plus the photography. But overall, like, you know, it's a really nice hybrid. It uses SLAM technology, so as you're scanning and kind of registering as fast as you can walk. So overall, the technology is a fantastic option. You know, at Langen, we use a lot of different components here, you know, mostly in earlier stages like SD, you know, when you're starting to get concept design or, you know, SD, where you're just kind of trying to understand the space. You know, the LiDAR data is really reliable. However, you're going to get, it's not quite the accuracy that you're going to get with you know, a terrestrial scanner. I know Merrick may disagree with me on that, but you know, as the software, you know, the one thing is like the hardware is kind of what it is, you know, but the software is developing every day, you know, and it's getting better and better. So you're getting better residuals when using that SLAM-based technology. Does everyone know what SLAM is?
Nope.
No? All right. So SLAM technology is, I'm sorry, go ahead. I think it's and mapping. But basically, so overall, these technologies are using the photogrammetry component to help alignments and the actual scan data. So it depends on the manufacturer, but it's going to create some sort of profile of the space, and then it's auto aligning. So as you're walking, it's trying to best fit your environment. This technology has come a long way from GeoSLAM and, you know, everything 20 years ago, but you know, it's a really reliable option. But when you're talking to the owners and you know, for design, they just have to know what the limitations are and what the benefits are. The next option out there would be terrestrial laser scanners. Now, these components also have two sensors on them. They're the LiDAR sensor and the photogrammetry, the camera sensors. However, the main component of all these type units are the LiDAR sensor. So this is going to be your highest grade LiDAR information that you can get. And the camera is kind of like secondary. So this is going to be when you need high accuracy information, high detail information, and that's all going to play a part when you're getting into the model, because the better the data set, often the better that you're going to be able to model and the higher detail that you're going to be able to model. And although, we're talking about BIM and we're more focused on buildings, there's a lot of different other specialty scanners out there that'll help you do site modeling. So even if your owner wants to know what's going on with the site, we're often focused on updating the model for the building, but it could be updating the model for the site as well, depending on what their goal is. But there are mobile scanners that mount to vehicles or boats or et cetera, golf carts and gators that you can actually scan as fast as you can drive. So if you're doing long range scanning, like highways and whatnot, it's kind of cool. And one thing I just want to stop here for a second is, the way AI is integrating with these technologies and these data sets are pretty impressive. Like right now, we're working with a few AI companies and we're developing auto extraction of points. So, we scan a highway and, it'll basically pluck out all the signs, all the poles, all the curbs, all the, details that a surveyor would go out and hand locate. But that's kind of the first step. So once we get past that, then we're going to move into using that for auto extraction within buildings. So we're just kind of hammering down the AI extraction of single points first, but that's where that technology is going. And then, of course, everyone's favorite topic generally is drones. It's not as applicable in New York City just because you're limited to where you can fly. But it's an important option out there, especially with owners that perhaps has ornate roofs. If you can't get out to the top of the roof, it's not safe to scan. It's not safe to put a person up there. You can use LiDAR components attached to a drone because you can also do photogrammetry and LiDAR sensors that can attach to it. So it gives you kind of options to get to infill that data set. And we had a bunch of success on a few parks. Historical sites where, we can't get up on slate roofs, but like we could scan it and then infill it for our modeling. So, it's just really important to understand that there's a lot of different options. And when you're talking to the clients and owners, just kind of relaying like, okay, that might be faster, but what are you giving up with speed? What are you giving up with accuracy? And then if I jump right into not all technologies are created equal. So, of course, Merrick's going to say scanner A is Navis. But overall, like as scan nerds that we are, like we test every manufacturer, every scanner on the market. And this data set, we took 4 different scanners and we scanned the same element or the pipes, and we just wanted to display like what kind of details that you're getting back with that return. So scanner A is going to be your probably higher level scanner that's probably going to be more expensive scanners, where scanner D is going to be probably your lower entry level type scanners. And you know what, like it's fit for purpose. So, if you're just trying to understand general space, like you don't need scanner A, but like if you're trying to do detailed modeling, perhaps that's the right manufacturer to go with. So when you talk to your owners and you're hiring somebody, make sure you have a conversation with what tools they're using to get that job done. And just another example of that would be, if you're modeling for, say, profiles, say you're modeling a wall in Revit, you want to have the best information possible to represent that element or that feature. So the different scanners are going to have different returns. So if you're scanning as scanner A, you're going to have, or maybe that's scanner B, you're going to have a better outline of like the profile that you're trying to extract. Whereas maybe if you're at scanner D, it's not going to pick up all those little features in the wall that could hurt your modeling down the line.
What scale are we talking about? We have that little notch that looks like foot, inch by inch, millimeter by millimeter.
I think this was just a molding. This isn't to scale, but actually I think it's just stretched for the screen. But like overall, like you can kind of tell like the profile of it. And if this is like a molding, that if that's important to your client, or a coping on a exterior facade.
We're talking about inches. If we're saying molding, we're talking about the scale of inches.
Right.
Quarter inch that you can get to.
So
the precision.
Like you have precision and then you have resolution. So like the return of it, like scanner D could be very precise, like the return of it could be very precise on the wall face itself. but the resolution is how many quantity of points are represented and returned off of a feature. So if you have a lower grade scanner, it's not going to have as many point returns. And then if you have a lower quality scanner as well, you might end up in a situation in the middle one where you have overlapping. So now you have two profiles of the same thing because you scan from two different directions. Now what are you doing? You're making a judgment call like, okay, am I splitting the center of it? Doesn't matter, but at the end of the day, if it does, and that stuff's important to your client, you want to make sure you're putting the right tool out there. Oh, good. So picture a 12 by 12 square that you scan, right? So if all return could be very accurate, so like that whole face of that plane will be, say, like millimeter accuracy, right? But like if the resolution is how many points in that grid. So like if you had every point every millimeter, or do you have a point every 10 millimeters? And if you have more gaps between points, it's going to miss objects, potentially miss objects. So if you were to scan a brick facade in that 1 foot by 1 foot, you might not see all the grout lines in that facade with resolution, but all the returns to it would be accurate. Yeah. And this is a good example too of knowing the technology. So we ran a test in our headquarters. Within 200 feet, we scanned with a Matterport system because Matterport's easy, right? You scan it, get nice photography. You press the button, say, I want the LiDAR data. Then you press another button, say, I want a floor plan, and it's fantastic, but it's fit for purpose, right? Like, so the test that we did, we compared it to other LiDAR scanners that we had. And what we found is within 200 feet with the Matterport system, it was out about 2.5 feet. So right? Like, so because you're using photogrammetry and it's uncontrolled, there's no way to register it properly. So there's uncorrected. So it's just purely relying on the imagery from room to room, especially linear corridors. It just, as you go location to location, like if first scan to the second, I shouldn't call it scan, the first setup from the second setup, if say you have 6 inches possible error, now you do another setup, that's another 6 inches. You do another setup, that's another 6 inches. So by the time you get to the 200 feet, you're out feet. Whereas mobile data, mobile scanners and terrestrial scanners, you can correct it and bring it back with control. I'm sorry? This Matterport, I think it was one of the original Matterports, but it's all the same for accuracy. But if you were to set up that Matterport in a closet and scanned and had a data set of that closet, it's probably pretty accurate.
Another thing that with this is with the error and stuff like that, is that an as-built? You might say it's as-built or we surveyed it properly. They did, or they did, but they did.
Not as-built.
Right. Right, but it's all relative. It's all relative to what.
But maybe that's fine for your purpose. Like maybe that error is okay, but you just have to make sure that doesn't land somewhere else where someone's like, oh, I have a LiDAR data set, great. I'm using it for a different purpose.
For acceptable, one would say that should be 6 inches, in terms of like a normal tolerance of 200 feet,
and that,
not 2 feet.
Yeah.
Once you say 2 feet,
well,
pretty bad.
Those are the conversations you need to have up front with the client so they understand what the limitation is that data set, because you can always collect a higher level of accuracy and then extract a lower detail, but you can never upgrade a inaccurate data set. Right. And then just to the right is just another example of what you see is you end up with misalignments, and you see this with terrestrial scanners, mobile scanners, everything. Like it just depending on how you scanned, how you controlled it, but like it's all just part of the conversation. And that kind of just brings me real quick to standards itself. As you're talking to your owners about the different lingo, and what you're referencing. Like if I say LOD or LOA, am I using RICS? Am I using a BIM form? Like what are you referencing? What does an LOD 100 to me mean to LOD 100 to you? But the one thing on the, and I'll focus more on the LOA right now, USIBD, who's familiar with that? All right. So if you haven't ever got a chance to look it up, look it up. Our company with other scan providers formed this organization to help corral accuracies. So just like the BIM Forum did with LOD modeling, the USIBD is trying to do for reality capture. And what, and that just basically goes, we're looking at LOAs instead of LODs just to try to make that point really to understand what's going on. But like within it, there's a whole guideline of different modeled elements, and it's listed out in two different aspects for LOA, which is level of accuracy. The first is the measured accuracy, and the second LOA is represented accuracy. And those are two completely different things. So when you're talking with the owners, the first thing I'm going to say is like, okay, well, how detailed do you need that base data set? Because again, you can always extract less accurately. You can never upgrade your model. So if the data set is set to say a 1-inch tolerance throughout the building, or maybe it's an 1/8 of an inch. I mean, I only agreed to that once ever, and I'll never do it again. But like overall, like if you're agreeing to that, you're set right there, and the client knows what the expectation is. I want a LOA 10, LOA 20, 30, whatever it ends up being. And then the represented accuracy is like what you're actually extracting from that data set to represent it. So like you can have a highly perfect point cloud, but like I want to do MEP modeling, say like, but I don't really care if it's within 6 inches, that's great. That's a whole different cost if you're modeling within 6 inches or you're modeling within an 1/8 of an inch. Right? So those are all different conversations that it's really good to have up front. And this Excel file is on the website for USIBD and the standards. So if you haven't ever had a chance to check that out, I would say try to log into it and download it. I think it's free to download. But the goal is to say like the higher level accuracy you need is the more dollar signs that you're going to see. And perhaps like a hybrid is to measure accurately, but then extract less. But you can have multiple different levels of accuracy within a model. You can have your structure and architecture perfect and your MEP low, but it's all different things to talk about. Any questions?
He's trying to get a unified way of talking about accuracy. Every single manufacturer will claim different types of accuracy. So you've got global, you've got local, you've got relative, you've got absolute. Everyone is claiming different accuracy, and yeah, we get to say the industry stuff.
What you're going to see is the manufacturer always has that in the most ideal, perfect scenario.
Exactly. I mean, we do the same. We scan in a controlled environment, and it's absolute accuracy. Yeah. Yeah. So it's I think it is good.
Nice. Fired.
How many you could expand on this.
So
Why is USIBD?
So the USIBD try to incorporate most of those standards and try to like corral everything into one place. Because everyone does. GSA has their different standards. They published them like 10, 15 years ago for LiDAR data. RICS, like in England, all that, like they got taken into consideration. But what it's trying to do is just exactly what the BIM forum was to take a problem, lay it out, and say like, this is what a model LOA to LOD means, and just to get people thinking about that, because right now it is a little bit like the Wild West when it comes to technology. You don't know who is the professional using that tool, it's like the same thing. Everyone can buy a hammer, but I'm not going to do the same thing to a hammer as like a carpenter can do, right? So it's just having those conversations about understanding the technology that they're using, and but the USIBD was formed just to say like, okay, we are the bigger professionals in the country. Like, let's try to standardize so the country's saying the same thing. But worth a look. Anybody else?
Sound cut out. I don't know if it's placed the other way.